Look, the Vikings aren't guaranteed to get a compensatory pick for Sam Darnold if and when he leaves to free agency, but there is a way that they can ensure that, and we're going to go over a plan for it today on Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much, especially those of you who have been with me throughout all of the dead period of February, pre-combine, nothing going on, season retrospectives and all that, but we're pretty much here. This is going to be the last solo show, probably before free agency Friday, planning to have 4-0 Fridays, and we'll talk about the draft a little bit, but otherwise, free agency is going to hit next week. So one of the things that I haven't really gotten a chance to do that I want to do today is go over the Vikings comp pick projection. Yesterday, I spent a little time talking about the formula and how the formula works. It's the second segment. You can go listen to that show for a little bit more on how the formula works, but not like the specifics of how the Vikings compensatory formula looks. Here's a question I've gotten just about every mailbag since the idea of tagging and trading Sam Darnold was around. And now that he looks poised to hit free agency, unless they come strike some kind of last second deal, it matters a lot. The Vikings would be slated to get a compensatory pick for Sam Darnold, much like they're getting for Kirk Cousins this year. And it would probably be a third rounder, but how can you guarantee that? Remember, they were supposed to get a third rounder for Danielle Hunter last year, but that got canceled out. It didn't happen. So how can the Vikings navigate the compensatory formula such that they fill their needs in free agency and don't end up sacrificing, but still get that third round pick the way that they are supposed to? And I am pleased to report that it actually probably won't be that hard. But let me explain exactly how all of this works. So every compensatory free agent the Vikings have departing is going to sign somewhere. If they don't sign back with Minnesota, they're going to sign somewhere for some amount of money. If that amount of money is high enough, they'll qualify for a compensatory pick, assuming they check off all the other boxes in terms of like age and, if they sign before like June 1st and all that other stuff, all things to watch. So really, this is going to end up giving you a list of like things to watch to make sure the Vikings get that comp pick. And the first one is going to be the actual size of the contract that Sam Darnold signs. It probably will not have trouble qualifying for a third round compensatory pick unless we get some real surprisingly low numbers. As long as it's over like 25 mil, it's probably going to be a third. So here's the way it works. The top 5% of free agent contracts signed count for a third round compensatory pick. The next 5% is the fourth round and so on. So as long as Sam Darnold is in that top 5% of free agent contracts, he should qualify for a third. There are some other wrinkles in that, though. For example, minority coaches that go from one team to another, or minority GMs that go from one team to another, will eat into the number of third round picks available to be awarded to teams. So for example, like Aaron Glenn, the Lions are going to get a third rounder for Aaron Glenn. That means one less third rounder in terms of actual compensatory picks. This is all going to be applied after all the like canceling out and stuff is going to be done, but it's something to keep in mind. So Sam Darnold's going to have to be one of the top free agent contracts. What's nice is that all the reporting we have surrounding Sam Darnold is that he is going to be one of, if not the biggest free agent contract on the market. He's a quarterback after all. Shouldn't be something to worry about too much. Probably got to be over like 25 mil to get to that threshold. And I'm getting that number from looking at last year's. So last year, the thresholds were as follows. And it wasn't exact because, again, age matters. There's like a point system that's proprietary that we don't know. So it's all kind of rough. But last year, a $21 million average annual value deal was about the minimum you could get a third round pick for. Kirk Cousins signed for like 41 mil, so it was easy. Danielle Hunter signed for more than that, so he counted as a third rounder. A fourth rounder, you had to be over like 12 mil. A fifth rounder, you had to be over like 8 mil. A sixth, over 4 mil. And a seventh, over 2.5 mil. So that 2.5 number is really important to keep in mind. It'll probably be something similar this year. Call it 3 million because the cap goes up, right? So if you sign a contract for over $3 million next year, you will count as a compensatory free agent. You'll count in the formula. You will have a big enough contract to count. So cap goes up. Let's say that it's gone up a little bit. So Darnold has to be over like 21 million. PFF still has his contract projection at 41.5 based off the tag. I think we kind of have learned that that's probably not going to happen, but I don't think it's going to go all the way down below 25. That would be pretty shocking to me. I think that based on history, on what like Geno Smith got and what Baker Mayfield got, two guys in really similar positions, that would be something, by adjusting for cap inflation, that lands you around $30 to $36 million. What that number actually is really important, because the other big criteria here is that Sam Darnold's third round compensatory pick needs to not be canceled out by an incoming compensatory free agent. So the way this works is the first thing the formula does is it asks, how many compensatory free agents did you lose? How many compensatory free agents did you gain? So if you wanted to play it really stupid, you could let all these expensive guys go. You could let Byron Murphy go and Cam Bynum and Sam Darnold and all these guys that are going to make a whole bunch of money, get a bunch of third round comp picks on the formula, and then sign a bunch of guys for $5 million a piece and cancel it all out if they were compensatory free agents. It doesn't matter if they don't quite match up on the dollar amount. Where it matters is when there is something uneven. Let's say the Vikings do lose 6 compensatory free agents and they bring in 5 compensatory free agents. And I'm going to do a sample for you later in the show where exactly that happens. But that means that they're going to get 1 compensatory pick. But which player is the compensatory pick? That's where the formula starts to cancel guys out. It tries to pick the closest thing. So if you've got 2 guys that are worth a 4th round pick, those 4th round picks will cancel each other out. If you got 2 guys worth a 7th, they'll cancel each other out. If you have, let's say, you lost a 3rd and a 4th round guy, and you gained a 5th round guy. Well, the 5th is closer to the 4th, so the 5th and the 4th will cancel each other out, even though they're uneven. And utilizing that is the way that you can let guys like Pat Jones and Shaq Griffin and Dalton Reisner ensure that you get that big 3rd rounder for Sam Darnold. That's the way that you can really make the compensatory formula work for you. In the sample that I'm going to do later, the Vikings lose 4 6th round compensatory players. That's Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, Dalton Reisner, Pat Jones, maybe even Cam Robinson, although the contract projections for him are pretty bloated. I think he might actually be a little bit lower, but as long as he counts and he's over that 2.5 mil threshold, which that seems pretty likely, wherever he signs in the future, as long as he counts, he will contribute to the right amount of compensatory picks canceling. And then you just find whichever one is all alone. With Sam Darnold making over $30 million most likely, his is really likely to be all alone. The only other criteria is that the next incoming free agent needs to not be closer to Darnold's than whatever the next one is. So let's say the next departing free agent with the biggest price tag is Cam Robinson. If the Vikings say bring in a guard for $15 million and Sam Darnold makes $30 million, Cam Robinson, let's say he makes, $7 million. I have no idea what he's going to make, but just use that number for now. Well, the new guard is going to be closer to Cam Robinson than he is to Sam Darnold. So he'll cancel out the Cam Robinson comp pick and the Sam Darnold one will be left alone. That's going to be at the crux of this. But I actually want to go a lot more thorough with you and talk about each and every player the Vikings have leaving and even apply it to a free agency plan, stealing one from the Minnesota Football Party. We did an exercise about that a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to kind of steal that plan with a couple of quick modifications for guys that I didn't know about before that I like now, and actually show you proof positive that this can work as long as everything stays under a certain amount, and then we can kind of talk about the actual impact of this and where the Vikings are precluded. Where does this actually restrict them? And when does it become a decision where you go, okay, but is it worth a 3rd round pick to not go after X guy? That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Chewy. With over 1,000 products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything that your pet needs, and I am so excited to be able to bring you Chewy. This has been a Chewy household for years. For those of you who don't know, I have pet rabbits. I'm holding one right now. I have the violent one. And we have used Chewy and their auto ship for years and years to get everything that they need. Food. These guys go through bags of hay that are about 10 times their size weekly. So they use it for their litter, they use it for their diet and everything. So we have to constantly have it coming, and Chewy makes that so easy for us to do. been using it forever, but you can manage your pet's health. You can have, they even have like telehealth vet clinics and stuff if you want to do that, and whatever else you need to keep your pet healthy and happy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. ZD's biting me. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. Are you angry, buddy? Are you trying to bite my hoodie? Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. So the next question becomes, we got to kind of be comprehensive here about what the Vikings are actually looking at in compensatory picks. So a couple things to keep in mind. One, a lot of these players might return. They're going to get canceled out. I'm about to read off like 12 players. You're not going to get 12 picks. And plus there's a cap. You can only get a maximum of 4 compensatory picks. Even if you lose 7 compensatory free agents and you don't sign any other ones, you max out at 4, whatever the highest 4 are. So here are the departing free agents that I think will have contracts big enough to qualify for a comp pick. Some of those contract projections are from the PFF free agency page that I've been using all offseason. If they don't have one, I'm just trying to use like comparable situations and then just adjusting it for this year's cap inflation and just trying to use like percentages to try to keep the numbers modern. So Sam Darnold, his contract projection, if it's over 30, if it's over 25 mil, it's a third rounder. Cool. That's the only guy who's slated to be worth a third rounder based on last year's numbers. So what the cutoffs, I'm using just the cutoffs from last year. They're going to be a little bit higher. The numbers are going to be a little bit higher than last year. So what I say here is a 5th might end up being a 6th in reality, but it at least gives you a ballpark. Cam Robinson's PFF projection is 18.75 mil a year. I think that's kind of crazy, but he is a starting left tackle. He's going to be 30 this year. And I think he kind of got ousted. Like, I don't think that that's the situation that makes enough money, but if you go by that, it's a 4th round pick. As long as it's over $2.5 or $3 million, he's going to count for something, but we'll put him down for a 4th right now and just take PFF's word for it. Byron Murphy is projected at 17, a little more than 17 million. That's a 4th rounder. Cam Bynum, also a 4th rounder at 14.5 million. So that's 3 players leaving that would be worth a 4th rounder if that was the compensatory pick. Daniel Jones is an interesting case. There's no projection for him really anywhere. Nobody knows what's going to happen with him, but I'm just going to slap the Sam Darnold deal on him. I think he's coming from a similar place as Sam Darnold, a guy that could start, but you wouldn't be happy about him starting, probably a backup, maybe a competition kind of guy. Give him the Darnold deal. Darnold made 10 million. I'll adjust a little bit for cap inflation and give Daniel Jones 11 million. That's probably over adjusting, but whatever. We'll give him 11 million. He counts for a 5th round pick. And if I gave him if I did the math more accurately, it wouldn't have changed that. Then you've got a bunch of players slated to make 6th round pick worthy stuff. Aaron Jones, Pat Jones, Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, and Dalton Reisner. Pat Jones and Shaq Griffin are different. They don't have PFF projections that I can like lean on. Which, by the way, on those, I just learned that Brad Spielberger wasn't involved in those, and because he left over the cap. I didn't know that, so I kind of trust them a lot less, but like I also am not very good at projecting contracts, so I feel at least gives us good placeholder numbers, and if they end up being wrong, we can still use this exercise to get a sense for how that would change things. But with Pat Jones, he's not on this list. I just gave him the DJ Wanham deal. I kind of figured it was a similar thing. He's coming off of maybe could compete for someone's starting job, kind of like DJ Wanham did. He had a good he looked like a good rotational player, but maybe not as good as a starter. That feels very DJ Wanham-ish to me. That would be 6.6 million this year. It would get you a 6th. And then Shaq Griffin, I just copy pasted what he got last year. I feel like he's just kind of going to make 5-ish mil, 4.5 mil on a series of endless 1-year deals until he retires, or has like some kind of breakout and gets a bigger deal or something like that. So we'll just run back the 2024 thing with him. We're doing a lot of rounding and estimating and stuff like that. So that gives us 1 3rd round player in Sam Darnold, 3 4th round players, 1 5th, and 5 6th round players. It's a lot of dudes. That's 10 players that could leave. But that's not necessarily what's going to happen, right? And here's one of the ways the Vikings can help to preserve that Sam Darnold pick is by filling their needs with their own guys. But even if they don't, it's kind of moot. So let's say, like, if they bring back Byron Murphy, that doesn't count anything toward the compensatory formula anymore. You just cross him off the list and he goes away. And he just becomes part of your team. If you do let Byron Murphy leave, he's a compensatory free agent. You're probably going to spend whatever that money was on his replacement, and those two will probably end up being close to canceling each other out anyways. So it's sort of a moot point with a lot of those guys. In my free agency plan that I did for the Minnesota football party, which I took what I submitted there, added a couple of the ideas from the other guys to kind of come up with this one. But that plan did keep Byron Murphy and Cam Bynum in-house. It kept Daniel Jones. It kept Aaron Jones. And a couple of other, like Jonathan Bullard and a couple of other players that aren't actually, that like maybe that like Jonathan Bullard could make like 2.75 mil and like maybe qualify or something like that. Some other like depth players that will be sort of close enough to the line where let's just pretend like that's not like, let's just be like as at like maximum pessimistic about it and round down on those guys and say they won't make it, to make this as hard on ourselves as possible and see if we can still do it, or see if we're going to be relying on that kind of stuff to give us a comp pick. But the way I have it set up, we're not relying on that kind of stuff to give us a comp pick. Okay, so the next order of business here is to assess the needs, right? So I have brought back via re-signings, I've brought back a cornerback, a safety. You've got your JJ McCarthy quarterback thing figured out. You've got a running back one. All you need to do is bring back like a Cam Akers, could be pretty cheap, and an extra defensive lineman. I'm bringing back Jonathan Bullard as well, and just taking that variable out of it, which is also part of this is tailored to kind of get rid of some of the like maybe they're a comp pick, maybe they're not situations, and just bring them back to the team so that we're not relying on those things to be a compensatory pick. We don't need those dice to roll in our favor. So that leaves the Vikings with 5 possible compensatory free agents left that could actually go out and hit the market, not including Sam Darnold. Those guys are Cam Robinson, Pat Jones, Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, and Dalton Reisner. So here's, again, your criteria that we need from this, right? For one, Sam Darnold's got to make more than $25 million, preferably over $30 million. I think that's probably around the normal range. If he is in the 20s, it would be a pretty surprising outcome, but we need that surprising outcome not to happen. 2, you need the incoming free agents to not be closer to whatever that Sam Darnold number is than they are to the highest outgoing guy. So in my case, that highest outgoing guy is that Cam Robinson $18 million deal. So if you bring in somebody, they need to not be closer to Darnold than they are to Cam Robinson. That's the part that gets a little bit funky, right? That's the part where, like, according to the projections, if you sign like a $21 million deal for Milton Williams, that's a name that a lot of people have been in on, that could get you in trouble. Let's say Sam Darnold signs for 30 mil, you sign Milton Williams for 21 mil, they're 9 mil apart. Well, if you don't have an outgoing free agent that makes at least $13 million on the open market, that means that Milton Williams will cancel out the Sam Darnold pick and you lose it. Who will be that guy? Well, in my plan, if I'm bringing back Cam Bynum and Byron Murphy and all these other guys, and Daniel Jones and all these other players that could make that money, I'm kind of putting myself in trouble there, right? It could be Cam Robinson if the PFF projection is correct and I'm wrong about it, but you're kind of like, now you're rooting for that. So keep that kind of thing in mind. Whoever the biggest free agent is that the Vikings sign, compare his average annual value to Darnold's average annual value. That difference is going to be a really key number on if the Vikings get their 3rd round pick. So who should those free agents be? This will be the fun part where I talk about how I address the rest of the needs, and then we can actually put this comp formula together and see if we actually get the result that we want. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Okay, it is time to actually try to put the compensatory picks together. So, if our goal is to keep Sam Darnold's 3rd round pick in our hands, we need to be very careful about who we actually go and sign. Now, there's a bunch of ways to do this, right? You could completely bypass this whole thing if you just go sign cap casualties. Go sign Draymond Jones and Jonathan Allen instead of going out and getting Milton Williams, and you're totally fine. But that does kind of hamstring you. If we preclude other players like Milton Williams, that might make it a little bit harder to sign somebody like Javon Holland. A lot of people like him. Or to sign somebody like, Khalil Mack. I'm looking at the other players that are scheduled to, or that are projected to get over $20 million a year. Somebody like Josh Sweat could be tough, but a lot of that's like edge rushers and receivers, and some of these guys are already tagged. Like, it would have been hard to get Trey Smith, but he's tagged. He's off the market unless you want to try to do a tag and trade. But now that doesn't actually hurt the compensatory formula. So if you want to try to trade it from the Kansas City Chiefs, if they don't get the deal done that they want, that kind of thing also probably happens a little bit later down the line. I don't think they were looking to tag Trey Smith to instantly flip him into draft picks. It's more or less try to get a deal done. And if it's August and one still isn't done, then maybe they dump him off. A lot of tag and trades that happen in the same offseason play out that way. But the actual players that this precludes you from is a pretty limited. It's probably Javon Holland and Milton Williams. Like, those, I think those are the two guys that like you can't get if you want to preserve your Darnold pick. And like, it's not like there aren't other options out there. And in fact, I have other options at those positions that I like here. If you really want to just insure it, go sign Rayshawn Jenkins instead as a safety. Just bring him in. There's another situation, I guess, while we're talking about safety that we should address, and that's Harrison Smith. I don't know if Harrison Smith is a compensatory free agent or not. I do not think he is, but I can't tell you for sure. And the reason is his contract has a weird structure. So he technically has like a $25 million base salary that becomes fully guaranteed on March 15th or something, I think, or 16th. Obviously, to everyone, that is not going to happen, but that is the deadline for the Vikings to make some kind of determination on Harrison Smith's contract. If they take the option, I think they have a void option, so they can void out the rest of his contract on March 16th and then he's cut. I do not believe that he would count as a compensatory free agent. The key here, when you talk about void years, is did they play out the amount of years that they promised that they would play? So if Harrison Smith has a year, even if it's obviously fake to everybody, if he has a year for 2025 on that contract for $25 million, that's obviously going to get cut. If that's on the actual contract, even as a dummy year, it does preclude him from being a compensatory free agent. So I'm not counting him in all of this. But if I'm wrong about that contract, of course it changes things, and good to know. But in this particular exercise, let's let him go, and you can bring in somebody, like Rayshawn Jenkins or whatever, and he might retire anyways, making all of this a totally moot point. But I brought back Cam Bynum, and in my free agency plan, I kind of abandoned the 3 safety thing. I think the Vikings basically lived in 3 safety last year. I think all 3 of their safeties played over 90% of the snaps in Metellus, Bynum, and Harrison Smith. But that's because they had Metellus, Bynum, and Harrison Smith, and because their third cornerback was Shaq Griffin, and they just would rather have Josh Metellus on the field than Shaq Griffin, and I find myself loath to disagree. So the thing is, if Harrison Smith is on the outs and he retires, the third safety becomes like Theo Jackson. I said Theo Jenkins. Theo Jackson. And that's going to be different. What if I go get 3 really good corners and I become a 3-corner team? So I think you need 5 defensive backs you feel good about and a 6th that's like a rotational role. So I opened it up a little bit more, and you can listen to more of my rationales behind some of these players on a episode from like a week or 2 ago, where I did like a full free agency plan, or the Minnesota Football Party. But here are the guys that I am bringing in free agency. Not a comprehensive list, but after I brought back all of those other all of those departing Vikings, the big names I'm getting, DJ Reed is one that we all really liked on the Football Party. I still really like him. I think he's just a really good fit for what the Vikings do, and he's just a good corner. He can play inside, outside. He can man up against like really difficult players. I would love to bring him in, and I would immediately give him like a 3-4 year deal and want him to be a core piece of the Vikings. So let's do that. The projection is for $14 million. So we're in the clear. If Sam Darnold gets a $30 million deal and DJ Reed gets a $14 million deal, physically he cannot be closer to Sam Darnold than he is to like whatever Cam Robinson makes. Even if Cam Robinson makes $2, $14 million is still closer to 2 than it is to 30 million. So we're good to go. I also, on a similarly sized deal, I'm going to bring in Will Fries, the guard from the Indianapolis Colts, Mike Hilton for an $11 million deal. And then Elsewhere in the trenches, I'm going to bring in Tershawn Wharton from the Chiefs. Had a really good Super Bowl for like he's projected to get like 8.25. He's a little bit more of a bargain bin guy, but I think gives you that pass rush that you're looking for. And pairing him with Jonathan Bullard and Harrison Phillips gives you a much more complete unit. Think of this as Jerry Tillery, but actually does what Jerry Tillery was supposed to do, which is rush the passer really consistently out of odd fronts. And then I'm also taking a page out of Sam Ekstrom's book and bringing in Cornelius Lucas to play tackle while Christian Darrisaw continues to come off that injury. They're pretty optimistic about him coming off of being able to like join during camp, but I don't want to chance it. And Cornelius Lucas makes a great backup, if anything, and probably isn't going to be that expensive. But let's say he makes $2.5 million and he does count toward a seventh. Again, let's be max pessimistic about these guys and say he counts towards us. Let's say he does end up counting toward the formula for whatever you have to sign him for. So if we do all of the math here on how these guys actually play out on the compensatory formula, we've taken Cam Bynum and Byron Murphy and Daniel Jones and Aaron Jones all out of the formula, right? So I brought in 5 guys and I lost 6 guys. To recap, we are losing Sam Darnold, Cam Robinson, Pat Jones, Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, Dalton Reisner. There are your 6 compensatory free agents. The guys incoming are Will Fries, DJ Reed, Mike Hilton, Tershawn Wharton, and Cornelius Lucas. The contract sizes that I told you are average annual values. I made this work cap-wise with a little bit more backloading and some void year stuff. And like I did a little bit more cap stuff to make this work on the cap. But if you're worried about that being too expensive of a list, what I had to do was I did one. I think I like halfway restructured Brian O'Neill's contract. I didn't even do the max. I did like some of it just to make that last little bit go over. And then I used a lot of 2026 money, but I end up with like $20 million in cap space headed into 2026 and like $10 million in cap space headed into 2025 for draft class and practice squad and all that other stuff. And I feel really comfortable with that because all of these deals are long-term. So I'm not going to have a lot of needs and like nobody is leaving in 2026. The departing free agents are really, really, there's like 2 guys that you'll care about at all. And one of them's like CJ Ham. So they're not going to have a lot of needs next year. So I'm not worried about having just $20 million next year at all. And plus, all of this stuff is super malleable and restructurable. So if you do end up really needing money, you got it. You're good to go. So if you're worried about that, that's my deal. But these contract sizes. So Will Fries would count as a 4th round pick. DJ Reed would count as a 4th round pick. So immediately those 2 guys are going to cancel out, say the 4th round pick from Cam Robinson and then like a 4th round pick from Daniel Jones or Cam Bynum or whoever signs for somewhere between like 12 and $20 million. Mike Hilton is a 5th, Tershawn Wharton is a 5th, and Cornelius Lucas is a 7th. But remember, it starts by counting how many are going to cancel each other out. So I'm losing 6 and I'm gaining 5. So I only have 1 guy left over, and it just needs to pick which guy has the most distance between his contract and everybody else. Well, the Will Fries deal is the biggest one. It's $14.25 million a year. And that is different from the Sam Darnold deal by $15.75 million. So it's $15.75 million away from the Sam Darnold deal. And with this Cam Robinson number that I think is ridiculous, it's like, that's $18 million. So it's actually closer to Sam Darnold than the Will Fries one is. So the Will Fries and Cam Robinson deals cancel out. But again, let's say Cam Robinson does not make that much money. Let's say he only makes $5 million. He still counts, but he counts as like a 7th round pick. Or let's say that would be a 6th. Let's say he makes $4 million. Okay. And let's say that that's a 7th round pick. Okay. So he becomes a 7th. He would cancel out pretty directly with Cornelius Lucas. Now, Pat Jones is the next one. So Pat Jones, I gave him the DJ Wanham deal. Remember, that's $6.6 million. So 14.25 is closer to 6.6 than it is to 30 still. So we're still good. We would have the biggest free agent compensatory pick of the offseason canceling out with Patrick freaking Jones. And there's like, I didn't really, like, I played everything as pessimistic as possible, and I didn't really spare any expenses, except I didn't go specifically for Javon Holland or Milton Williams. Those are like the 2 guys that maybe aren't going to be active here. And by the way, if Sam Darnold signs a deal for like $38 million, that's no longer true. Now you can go for anybody. And that guy just won't be closer to the next guy than he is to Sam Darnold, or he will be closer to the next guy than he is to Sam Darnold. So all of this is to say the things the Vikings have to be aware of is they can't take in more compensatory free agents than they lose. They just have to be aware of who that number is and what everybody's going to sign for. Another thing to root for is they have to sign before June 1st. So like Dalton Reisner, who loves to wait until the eve of camp to sign a deal, if he waits until after June 1st, he won't count anymore. And then he won't cross anything off the list, and then Sam Darnold would get crossed off the list. So that's something you have to be aware of if you don't want to rely on like Dalton Reisner's deal. Or you can just bring him back to Minnesota, and then he's just not part of this again, and you can let somebody else go instead. So they just have to be aware of where that's at, who their compensatory departing free agents are going to be, and how much they can trust those guys to sign a deal over like $4 million, right? Somebody like Brandon Powell, you're probably not going to rely on that from him if you are going to let him go. Or somebody like Ryan Wright, if you let him go and you don't tender him, like probably not, right? Or if he is, like it's going to be dicey. They're going to be right on the line, and you don't want to rely on that. You got to make sure that the highest guy is closer. The highest incoming guy is closer to the highest outgoing guy than he is to Sam Darnold. And you have to also hope that Sam Darnold just in general makes over 25 mil, so it actually is a third round pick. If he makes a $20 million deal because his market sucks way more than everybody thought it did, that would be more like a fourth round pick, and then that would I think be a bummer, but it would still be a fourth round pick. So hopefully that all makes sense. Hopefully that gives you the compensatory formula breakdown that you are looking for, but you're rooting for all the outgoing guys to get big deals. If they don't re-sign Cam Bynum or Byron Murphy, they let those guys go, and Cam Robinson goes, and Daniel Jones goes, and Aaron Jones goes, and all those guys, you're rooting for them to get a whole bunch of money elsewhere. And most of all, you are rooting for Sam Darnold to get money elsewhere. If you didn't want to do that just because you like the guy, like I do, then you at least have this reason to. Tomorrow's 4-0 Friday, so we're going to talk to Tyler, assuming I've got it scheduled, all right? As long as nobody falls ill or anything like that, we'll talk to Tyler, and then we got free agency next week. Get excited, everybody. And as always, Skull.